What is this place? There's literally nothing around us, just endless desert and a few dead bushes.
I started running with hopes to find some oasis with some water and greenery, but all I found were some dead trees. I spent a good couple of hours just running around, but eventually...
Wait, that's some kind of structure. I am either going insane or we actually found some life.
I quickly got down from the dune. It turned out to be a local vehicle dealer, and a selling point. It definitely has seen some better days, but we can order everything we need. We got a real chance to turn this abandoned desert into a lush farm. Not sure if it's possible to grow anything, but I guess we will have to find out by doing. I decided to first try and sell some of these bushes that grow around us. I chopped one down, took it to the store, and sold for a mind-boggling $9 to afford the cheapest tractor. We only need to gather like 2,000 of them, but we had no other choice. So I kept chopping them off and bringing it to the store. After just a short while, we have collected this massive pile. That got us our first $261. I immediately invested $200 into a nice old Dolpima PSX 90 chainsaw and spent another $60 on a pushable cart. It should speed up the process significantly. The first cart quickly filled up, so I put some straps on and took it to the store. Got $45 for it all. But then I thought of something.
Why the heck are we cutting the bushes when we could cut the dead trees? Surely they're worth more than these dead bushes.
So I cut down the dead tree, chopped it into some small chunks so we could lift it, loaded it onto the cart, put some straps on, and took it to the store. Got $1,192 for a single tree. It is the same amount as 150 bushes. Even though it is a nice profit, we shouldn't be too excited, as we only got a few of them nearby. And pushing this cart through half of the desert is not really feasible. If we want to grow anything, we will need water. And the cheapest deep driller is this one for $5,000. We could risk it with a simple well that costs just $1,500, but I highly doubt it will be deep enough to reach any water. So I continued on with cutting down the dead trees. It took a good couple of hours to load 5 more trees onto the selling station. When sold, they netted almost $5,000. But before we could build anything or grow anything, I went out to search for a more level area. Quickly found this nice, flattish area that was conveniently just one dune away from the shop. Then immediately spent $5,000 on a water tower. As you can see from all the rust, it is refurbished but should do the jobs. For our first season in the desert, I decided to try our luck at growing some potatoes and some cactuses. So I spent $220 on a hand-pushable plow, $300 on a seeder, $300 on a water tank, and spent what's left on a few bags of potato seeds. First, I brought the plow back to the yard, if we can call it that, and started making some fields around the water tower. Made these 2 nice fields on the sides of the water tower, then loaded in the seeds into the seeder and planted 1 field of potatoes and the other one with spinach. By the time I finished planting, it was already getting dark, so I spent a few bucks on a nice rug and just slept outdoors as it's nice and warm. But the next morning we were surprised by some rain. All the crops are growing at an insane pace with the heat and this rain, but we need a shelter. So I started selling all the dead trees around our farm. Sold the first tree for $1,214, the second one for another $1,380, and the third one for another $1.3K, and immediately spent $500 on a tiny house. It has everything we need, a bed and a shower. But we need to figure out a way to invest the rest of the money, as we only have a few dead trees around us that we can sell, and after they are gone, we will have to rely only on our farm. I decided to grow some prickly pear cactus. Bought about 20 plants for just over $2,000. All we need is to give them some water, and in turn, they grow some kind of fruit that we can sell. It is a perfect crop for our climate. I watered them all. We can immediately see the fruit starting to grow, even though it will take a few more months before they are ready. But we had no time to chill, so I ran to the dealer to check the tractor prices. Unfortunately, all of them were way too expensive for us. All we could afford was this tiny 13 horsepower T16 tractor for $800. Spent another $100 on an old rusted out trailer for it. It's not much of a tractor, but at least we don't need to push the cart by hand. Started cutting down all the dead trees we could see and transporting to the shop. It took a couple of months, but I've cut down every single dead tree in the desert. Only a few left in the far distance. We have collected this massive pile of logs from it all. That sold for a mind-boggling $13,469. In the meantime, the cactus produced the first fruits as well. I loaded them onto the trailer and took it to the store to see if it's even worth growing them. Got almost $5,000 for them all. It won't make us rich, but it's definitely worthwhile to grow them as they only need water. The crops are all growing nicely, but they got a lot of weeds that we need to kill, and we should also spray some fertilizer. But we have a problem. The tractor only has a trailer hitch. It can't attach any implements. So I ran to the dealer and bought a new tractor. The only thing we could afford was this Volvo Crabbar T425 with 32 horsepower for $5,000. Also bought the cheapest sprayer for $1,350, 4 barrels of herbicide for $300 each, and 4 barrels of liquid fertilizer for $400 each. Hopped into the Volvo, attached the sprayer, first loaded in some herbicide. We should probably build a road from the dealer to the farm. It cost about $1,000 to build this tiny little dirt road. It is way easier to climb the hill on dirt than on the loose sand. I unfolded the sprayer, sprayed some herbicide first, then some liquid fertilizer. Brought all the herbicide and fertilizer back to the yard, but we need a shed to store it all, as leaving it in the open sun is a very, very bad idea. Spent $2,000 on a nice little shed that is basically made out of scraps, some wood, and some old metal sheets. Loaded all the supplies into the shed, watered the cactus. After just a few months, the desert is already looking promising, but we need to expand and make some new fields while the crops are growing and we have some free time. I parked the sprayer, spent $1,050 on the most basic plough, attached it, and started making some new fields. It took a couple of months of work, but we managed to make these 2 nice new fields. In the meantime, both the potatoes and the spinach grown up and are ready for harvest. So I ran to the store, spent $1,500 on a simple pushable harvester, and started the harvest.
The potato yield is insane. We filled like 15 full boxes. But the spinach was totally not worth it, as from a similar size field, we barely got 5.5 boxes. We just need to figure out a way to sell them all. The boxes are just too heavy to lift by hand.
I first loaded all the cactus fruit onto the trailer and took it to the store. I hope it's enough to afford some kind of forklift. Increased our balance to almost $9,000. It was enough to afford this small John Deere forklift that cost us just $3,050. It's not the best forklift out there, but it should be enough to load all those pallets. Also spent $2,500 on a flatbed trailer. Drove back and started loading all the spinach first. All the spinach sold for almost $6,000, and all the potatoes for another $14,000. The potatoes were definitely a smart investment. As for the spinach, I don't think it's actually worth growing them, so I planted a bunch of cactus in its place. But we also need a bigger water tank now. I spent $3,000 on this 3.2 ton water tank, filled it up with water, and watered all the new cactus. We still have almost $10,000 left, so I spent $7,000 on a couple of greenhouses. Also bought a 5-meter wide cultivator for $1,000, and spent another $1,000 on a simple seeder. We are back to being broke. I climbed into the Volvo, attached the cultivator, cultivated all the fields, and started planting. Planted 1 field of canola, 1 field of wheat, and the last one, this big one with barley. But we had nothing else to do, so I attached the plough and started making some more fields. It took a good couple of months, but I managed to make these 2 new massive fields. In the meantime, all the crops got nice and green. We just need to spray some herbicide and fertilizer over them. I climbed back into the Volvo, attached the sprayer, loaded in some fertilizer first, spread some fertiliser, then some herbicide. But we have a problem. We are broke as hell. And to be fair, we have nothing to do around the farm. The crops are growing, we can't really plant anything, so I just went inside to rest for the winter. By the time I came back outside, it was already March and it was nice and warm again, but our debts increased to almost 2,000. Luckily, we grew some cactus fruit over the winter time. I climbed into the T16 and loaded all the prickly pear cactus onto it. Sold the first load for about $30,000, and the second one for another $34,000. These simple fruits are making us a fortune, but I think it's not wise to rely solely on them, as we could easily oversaturate the market and make the prices fall. We should diversify. I spent most of the money, over $57,000, on this huge nursery. It needs just some water and solid fertiliser and produces us a bunch of bonsai trees, cypress and eucalyptus. Our climate is perfect for growing them. I loaded a couple of tanks of water into it. Then I bought a couple of pallets of solid fertiliser for $19–20 each, and loaded them into the nursery as well. Now we just need to give it some time, and hopefully we will get some nice little trees. I just realised we spent a full year in the desert already, gone from an empty desert to this cosy little farm, but we had no time to chill. We got some planting to do. I hopped back into the Volvo, spent almost all of our money on a planter, attached it, loaded in some seeds, and decided to plant a field of sunflowers. Why sunflowers, you may wonder? Well, we got plenty of sun, and sunflowers need sun, right? Why else would it be named sunflowers? By the time I finished all the planting, it was already almost midnight. I could barely see where I was planting and where not. I hope we didn't miss like half the field. The next morning, I was met by a freaking hailstorm, so I put a raincoat on and still went out to check up on the fields. We planted a full field of sunflowers yesterday, and the big one with grass, but I quickly realised that it is a bad idea to do anything in this weather, so I just went back inside. The next morning the sun was back, so I went to check up on the nursery. The trees were definitely bigger and looked healthy. In just a few months, we should be able to sell the first ones. The wheat and barley still need some more time as well. We need to spray some fertiliser to increase the yield even more. The grass is growing insanely fast though. We planted it just a couple of months ago and we can already cut it. But I first hopped into the T16 and sold off all the cactus fruits for over $14,000. It was enough to buy this tiny 2.4 metre mower for $8,000 and this tiny windrower for another $5,000. Attached the new mower onto the Volvo tractor and started cutting all the grass. But it took way longer than I anticipated, as I finished windrowing only in the middle of June. And in the meantime, even the barley became nice and ripe and ready for harvest. All we need is a harvester now. Luckily, the nursery grew the first eucalyptus for us. I loaded it onto the T16 and took it to the store. It sold for a mind-whopping 8.8k, but all the harvesters are way out of our price range. So I also sold off all the cactus fruits for an extra $14,000. It was enough to buy ourselves this nice little Massey Ferguson combine for $13,800. Spent another $2,800 on a header and $4,000 on a grain trailer. Attached the header and started the harvest. But the trailer filled up quickly, as we still have almost half the field not harvested and everything is full. We need a silos, but we can't afford any of them. The cheapest one costs $9,000. We are only about $7,000 short, so I spent $1,200 on a grain trailer for the T16.
We have filled up the grain trailer, the T16 trailer, and even got almost a full harvester. It's around 10,000 litres of barley just from this field alone.
I parked all the trailers and the combine near the shed for now, then attached the windrower onto the Volvo tractor and windrowed the straw into some nice little rows. The next morning brought us a bunch of new problems though. Both the canola and wheat are ready for harvest, yet our trailers are all full, so I did the only thing we could afford. Used up all of our money to lay a nice asphalt patch near the nursery, and loaded all the barley into a pile on it, and started the harvest. The canola and wheat yield wasn't as good as barley though. We got 1,500 litres of canola and a bit over 4,000 litres of wheat. I decided to sell them both, as we need some cash to buy a forage wagon. Sold the canola first for just over $2,000, and wheat brought in another $3,300. It was barely enough cash to buy this simple Agromet forage wagon. But we have a problem. The Volvo tractor has no connection for the PTO, this yellow thingy, so we can't work the forage wagon, and we got no cash to buy a new tractor. As a last resort, I bought this hand-pushable baler for just $200, and began our daily running session making all the bales. Made close to 200 of them, but the legs are killing me, so I went inside to get some rest. The next morning, I started off by collecting all the straw bales. Sold the first load of straw for just over $5,000, the second one for another $4,000. Also sold off all the cactus fruits for $19,000, but I got lonely, so I decided to invest in some livestock. It cost us about $1,000 to level out a nice area beside the nursery. Spent another $9,000 on a chicken coop that can house up to 150 chickens. And spent another $5,000 on a sheep barn. Bought 75 chickens for $50 each. Plus, I spent another $6 on a rooster. And bought 15 8-month-old sheep for $538 each. Now we just need to load in the food. But we had no way of loading the barley into the feeding pans. So I hopped into the T16 and began collecting all the grass bales. Loaded some of the grass bales into the sheep barn, sold the first load of grass bales for almost $5,000, and the second one for $3,200, but it was still not enough to afford any skid steers. Luckily, we got a couple of eucalyptus at the nursery. I loaded them onto the flatbed trailer, and sold for $8,600. It was barely enough to buy this bare-bone Massey Ferguson loader for $12,000, and it cost us another $1,300 on a universal bucket. I immediately used it to load all the barley into the chicken coop feeding pans. It should be enough feed to last the whole year up until the next harvest. All the animals are healthy and fed. We can get back to working the land. We kind of forgot to spray any fertilizer or herbicide over the sunflowers, and they are too tall to spray now, so we will just leave them as is. Maybe we can sell them as ecological for some extra markup. The meadow can wait for some time as well. But we need to prepare the harvested field for new planting. I climbed into the Volvo tractor, attached the cultivator, and began loosening all the soil to prepare it for planting. Planted the big field with wheat, and decided to leave the other field unplanted as we don't need so much wheat for the chickens. We should try and maximise the yield this year. I bought one of the cheapest fertiliser spreaders for $580, bought a few bags of fertiliser, and spent the rest of our money on some lime. Attached the new spreader, loaded in some solid fertiliser, spread in over the fields, then loaded in some lime, and covered the fields with that too. We have got only 2 more jobs before the winter comes: cut and bale all the grass, and then harvest all the sunflowers. I decided to start off by cutting all the grass to make some winter food for the sheep. Climbed into the tractor, attached the mower, and started cutting it all. Took a full month but made a full field of bales. By the time we finished, even the sunflowers were ready for harvest. We just need to get some money for the corn header. Collected all the grass bales to hopefully afford one. Loaded one trailer into the sheep feeding pan, and sold the first load to the store for almost $5,000, and the second one for another $5,000. It was barely enough to buy this 5.3 metre wide corn header for $9.5K, attached the header, and started the harvest. But the yields were not very good, as we didn't put in any fertiliser or herbicide. The weeds are almost the same size as the sunflowers. Even without any fertiliser, managed to squeeze out 5,400 litres of sunflowers, that I immediately sold for almost $12,000, as we don't have any use for it anyways. We have spent over 1.5 years in this desert, going from the empty desert to this massive farm. If you like the video, leave a like, subscribe, and consider leaving a comment of what you want to see next. See you in the next one.